Hi, and welcome to Crafts by Two. I'm Ken, and for this episode of our series Coloring Book SVG 301, we're going to be talking about coloring very good. And today we're covering staying within the lines. Let's get started. So take your coloring utensil and start coloring. And if you go very slow at the edges, stay within the black. And that's how you can color within the lines on Coloring Very Good.
April Fools! Hi, and welcome to Crafts by Two. I'm George.
And I'm Ken.
And this week we're doing Coloring Book SVGs 301.
And in this episode, I'm going to show you how you can merge your images to reduce the number of pieces. A lot of the images you find in coloring books have lots of different parts, like last week's Rarity, Pony. There were tons of parts to that mane and everything. So I came up with a way to help reduce the number of parts but still be true to the picture.
So that's why we do these how-tos like once a week. We want to give you guys time to play around with the techniques that we show you. That way you can get a lot of practice in, so the stuff that we show you the following week isn't so scary.
It can be complicated, but we want you to be able to just take your time and work slow. Everything's not going to be perfect the first time you sit down and try this out. If you haven't done it, it can be pretty confusing. So we take it slow and show you how it works out.
So don't expect your first time doing this for you to be Michelangelo and make the perfect SVG file. It might look perfect and not cut exactly like you wanted it, and you're going to have to go back and edit it again.
Welcome to Coloring Book SVG 301. In this episode, we're going to show you how you can take some of your traced bitmaps and merge pieces together, just to make it easier to cut out and work with. You'll probably recognize the image on the left. That was the pony that we used in the 201 video. I helped George glue this down, and 37 pieces alone for the mane and the horn. That was a lot of work. And a lot of our scans come out looking like that because of all the fine detail on the images. So in this episode, I'm going to show you how you can use tools in Inkscape to merge pieces together. And you can see on the right, I took it from 37 pieces for the mane and the horn down to 8 pieces. So this is going to be a lot easier to work with and to cut. So let's get started. So here we have the original piece with all 37 pieces in the mane and the horn. I'm going to be working with this image to kind of artistically work together and merge the pieces, so fewer pieces, fewer cuts, and it's easier to work with. And I'm still going to try to stay true to the original image. Before you work on your image, you need to make sure that it's not grouped together. Using the regular pointer tool, click on your image, and then go up to Object and Ungroup. Step 1, I recommend zooming in real close because you're going to need to be doing some fine detail work. You can see some of these lines are kind of fine. So on the keyboard, you use the plus key to zoom in, and then just the bars to move around to get to the area you want to work with. And I'm going to start with this smaller piece on the mane. So I'm going to switch over to the pen tool and start drawing a shape. What we're going to do is lay shapes over the multiple pieces and then merge them together. At this point, you just have to set down a rough shape to begin your work. You don't have to go into all the fine detail just yet. We're going to be cleaning it up and making it work with our artwork as we go along. So with the pen tool, you just start clicking where you want to start your shape. And that sets down what's called a node or a point. And as you drag to where you want your next node to be, you'll see the little red line trailing behind my mouse pointer, letting me know that that's the shape that's going to be drawn. And it doesn't have to be perfect, like I said, but you want to try to work with the shape of your drawing to be true to it. So now I'm going to make a little bit of a bigger chunk, and here at these spaces between the main, I want to have a nice curve to keep it organic, which is true to the artwork, but I also want it to be a curve for the cutting, because these curve shapes cut smoother and better than a sharp angle. You'll notice when you try to cut things small on the even with the Explorer, it can catch and rip the paper a little. So I want to make curves to be as smooth as possible. So to give me that groundwork, I'm going to kind of build a little point in, and that's really small, so let me zoom in even more. So at the gap, I'm clicking at the edge, going in a little, and then clicking at the edge again. And it doesn't have to be perfect at this point. We're going to be able to move things around and adapt it. I'm just laying out a basic shape. And if I come to the bottom here, I need to scroll. Whoops. So one more notch here. And when you get to the end, it's a little hard to see. I'll zoom in again, which didn't really help because of the sides of the nodes. As I bring my pen over, you can see the end where I started turn red in the background. Kind of flashes for a second as I pass over it. That's letting me know that it's going to close the shape if I click there. So with one more click, it's created my shape. So let me zoom back out. And it defaults to this black shape. So let's make it into something a little easier to see. I'm going to choose red. I usually use red or the bright purple, but in this case, since the main's purple, I'm going with red. So going down to the bar on the bottom and clicking on the red. You also want to take care of the color of the stroke, and that's the line around the outside of your shape. If you're following along with our regular tutorials, the stroke or the line around the outside of the other shapes that you created when you're scanning is either none or undefined. I'm just going to set it to none. And that's this red X with the white background at the start of the color bar at the bottom. And to set the stroke, you shift click, so I'm holding down shift on the keyboard and clicking on none, and now that got rid of the color for the stroke, the outline on the outside. Now we're going to refine this shape a little bit more. So I'm coming over to the node tool on the left, because now we want to work with the nodes and make our shape a little more refined and fitting for the drawing that we're working with. I'm going to zoom in a little more, and you'll notice I really didn't do much with the edges here where the shapes overlapped. It really doesn't matter with these parts where they overlap, because Inkscape, when we merge the tools, the items together, are going to make those shapes blend together really well. What we're really concerned with here is what we're creating in the gaps between the shapes. So these black areas, we want to make sure that things blend together nice and smooth. So I'm just going to start moving around some of the nodes to move the shape around by clicking on the node and then dragging it. And this lets me refine the shape a little bit. And I didn't give enough of a point there because I'm going to show you how to make curves in just a minute. I want to make sure there's a good space there for the curve I want to make. And just scrolling a little to come down here. This isn't too bad. Okay, so now I'm ready to refine this shape a little more. Right now it's all blocky, and I want to have it curve and fit these kind of organic curves of the mane a little bit better. So what we need to do now is to create some handles. And handles are the curves that will draw out the shape and bend and curve it like gravity a little. The first thing you want to make sure is up top here on the toolbar, you want to make sure that you have it showing Bezier handles of the selected nodes, because you need to see the handles to be able to work with them. So make sure that this item on the toolbar is pressed down. Now we can come down to one of the nodes, and if you hold down the shift key on the keyboard and drag out from the node, that pulls out a handle, and you can see this handle affects the line segment with the curve. So right now I'll bring this down a little and bring this over. That gives a little curve. And each node can have two handles coming out of it to affect the line segment to either side of the node. So I pulled this one out on the left, kinda, and that curved this segment of the line, and by coming again, holding down the shift key to the same node and pulling in the other direction, I can create a handle that affects the line segment on the other side. So if I click off of it, you can see now I've got a curve that fits my shapes pretty nicely on the top. And a line segment can have two handles affecting it. So I have a handle coming out from this node affecting the curve of this line segment, and I can bring a handle out from this side, and these two handles kind of work together to give very fancy curves if you want. For this one I don't really need that, so I'm just going to tuck that back in and bring this handle over and readjust my work that was going on down there. So I can work around the outside a little to get that curve for the mane looking a little bit better. Just going to bring this one over, drag it out a little. So the outside looks pretty good now. So let's turn to the inside of the mane. I've got these sharp angles, and I had mentioned that these sharp points really don't cut well, especially at small sizes. I want to get a nice little curve in here. A quick way to do that is clicking on the node, and up here there's a button to make the selected nodes auto smooth. And this works really well in this case because I've got this little notch going on, and it knows that I want to have a shape this wide between these two nodes, and I want it smooth at the top. So I click that node to select it and click on the make nodes auto smooth, and it automatically made that a nice curve. It automatically put two handles out to the sides. They're really close, but you can see them there. And it made it as wide as my two nodes underneath. But it's not quite in the right place, so if I drag things around a little, adjusting the nodes on the top and the bottom, that gives a nice shape to my interior there. If you zoom in, you can see that it's not perfect, and sometimes you might have to fiddle with that a little, but it doesn't have to be truly perfect. You can still see, if I zoom in even further, there's still some purple showing, but that's going to be okay when we merge the object together. What matters is I've got a nice smooth curve here, so when I'm cutting, it's not going to catch or tear there on smaller sizes. I'm going to zoom back out and work with the other ones. So again, clicking on the node to select it, going up to the toolbar, and saying make auto smooth, and it automatically makes a nice little curve. And I'm just going to eyeball it and bring those together and come down to this last part of the mane. And I guess I should put a little bit more of a curve here. So I'm going to drag out holding the shift key and bring this node over a little bit to bring a little bit more of a natural curve to my pieces. So just this last little notch here. So again, clicking on the shape, all working with the node tool, lets me see all the little nodes that make up my shape. Clicking on the dot and clicking on auto smooth. And then cleaning it up just a little. So clicking off of everything again, you can see how I've created this little bridge here between all the different pieces of this little portion of the mane. One thing you want to make sure you're checking on as you work though is make sure that these little spaces, these bridges that you're creating, aren't too narrow, because you don't want it to be so small that when you're cutting it at a much smaller size that you get very fine strips that can tear easily when you're trying to work with them. So if it looks like something's just a little too small, if you zoom out, and I zoomed out using the minus key on the keyboard, and I'm going to use the plus key to zoom back in. If you found things were a little too small, you can just come back to your shape while you've got the node tool selected and just drag those points around just to kind of make things a little chunkier. So zooming back out again, this gives me a lot more space to work with when I'm cutting, so I don't have to worry about fragile edges while I work. Okay, so I've got my bridge made, everything's looking okay. Now I'm ready to merge the pieces together. Switching over to the regular pointer tool, I come back over, and while holding the shift key, I select my parts. So my new part, and then the 4 parts I want to group with it. Be careful you don't click on the background image or any other parts you don't want to group together. At the bottom in the status bar, it'll tell you how many objects you have selected. And it's letting me know I have 5, and I know that between the parts in the main and my new piece, I have 5, so I'm good to go. To merge them together into a new shape, while they're selected, I come up to Path and say Union. Now this is giving me a new shape. If I switch over to the node tool, you'll see that this is all one piece now, with its own outline. At this point, you can look at your shape and see if you're happy with it and make sure that there aren't any little notches or curves that might be a problem. Right here, it's a little hard to see. There's a little extra notch I'm not quite happy with. I'm going to use the node tool and click on it, and I see there's a little bit of a cluster of points there. Using the zoom tool, the plus key on the keyboard, I can zoom in to work with those. Sometimes when you merge pieces together, it creates lots of extra nodes, and you might not need all of these. In this case, it created a little extra notch here in my shape I'm not quite happy with. Sometimes when you're clicking on these nodes, it can be hard to work with them with these handles in the way. You can always come back up to the toolbar and turn off the show the handles just to get them out of the way temporarily while you work. When you want them back, just toggle the button on again to see your handles. For now, I want them off though. Now I want to click on one of the nodes, because I want to try to slim down this shape a little. And with it selected, I can come up here and tell it to delete the selected node on the toolbar, the little minus over a node symbol. And Inkscape helps you out by still trying to keep the curves as relatively close as possible. I'm still not happy with that notch and that shape there. I'm going to turn the show the handles back on and click on this node, and now I can use the handles to kind of smooth that shape a little. And if I zoom out and click off of it, you'll see now that's not as sharp. I was just concerned that that could be a part that wouldn't cut well. You don't have to be fanatical about it, but you do want to try to keep it as smooth and clean as possible. So if I zoom out, now instead of 4 pieces, especially with this little piece on the side, I now have 1 piece to work with, which is going to be a lot easier to glue down. So now I'm going to start working on some of the other pieces. We're going to fast forward through it, but there may be a few comments as we go along that I'll stop and show you the details. You really just want to work with your image and choose shapes and connections that complement the piece and don't really change the original artwork. I'm trying to keep the mane looking as kind of wrapped as possible, but still keeping it as few pieces as possible to make it easier to work with. On this next portion, I'm going to connect things along this side on the left, and then kind of bring this swirl around in the center, making it all one piece. I'm selecting the pen tool, and then zooming in with the plus key, and starting to draw in my shape. So the outside's going to be more of a solid piece, and then over with the little strands to the side is where I'm going to be doing more of my curves. So I do my little crocodile teeth notches, and I already know that one's going to be too shallow, so I'm going to have to adjust that. So with my piece selected, I'm going to make the fill red by clicking on the color, and then make the stroke none by shift clicking on the X for none. Now I'm going to zoom in and start refining. Switching over to the node tool, and just start moving things around, getting some nice curves in here. I'm holding down shift to drag that out. And one thing I didn't mention before is you don't have to use the shift key just to move things around. You only use the shift key when you're dragging out new handles. So I'm not holding the shift key now just to move this item around. Need a little bit of a curve from here. And you can click off to judge your work. There's a little bit of a notch there, but it's not that bad. I think it's going to be okay to leave that one there. Let's work on the inside. So I've got my node selected. I come up to the toolbar and say Auto Smooth, and just refine things a little to give me a nice filled shape there. And I know I mentioned that auto tool, but you don't always have to use that. I can just shift drag out to bring my own nodes and handles out. And if you keep them kind of in a straight line between the handles, you get that nice curve. And sometimes you just might need to do that to help get a shape that looks good. So just continuing to click around, and I know I made this one way too shallow, so I'm bringing these points in to give a little thicker connection. And because I'm lazy, I'm going to keep auto smoothing. And that's still a little shallow for my taste, so I'm bringing that one in and scrolling up just a little. I think that looks okay here. Let's bring this in so it's not quite as sharp. So I can zoom out. So there's my connecting piece, and switching back to the regular pointer, I can start shift clicking on these parts to select them all. I've got 6 selected, and coming up to path and union. And I've got a little bit of an ugly connection there. I'm going to zoom in and switch back to the node tool, and I've got these 2 little things here that are competing, giving me a little bit of an ugly notch. I'm going to select one of them and come up to the top and delete that node. Now if I click off, that's much smoother, so I'm happy with that. And you can see that was pretty quick. Once you're comfortable just clicking around and working with the nodes, you can fill those shapes in really quickly. So I'm going to finish this one off. This one I'm going to kind of continue this swirl of the curl over here. And here I use the handles from both sides to give me a nice curve that carried over that shape. Now this last little piece is really hard to cut, and I'm not even going to create a bridge in this case. I'm just going to take the nodes of the existing little part and play with those to bring this shape into line with things just a little bit better. So this is an example of what's called a smooth node. You'll notice when I try to move one handle, the other handle moves along with it. This is Inkscape trying to keep those things in a line. Maybe if we wanted to make a nice little curve, like our smooth curve up here, that can be handy, but in this case, I want to be able to manipulate the size of the curve individually. To change that over, I click on it once to select it, and I can tell that it's a smooth node because it's a square. And if I have it selected and come up to the top, I can click it and make a selected node into a corner. When I do that, you'll see it change from a square into a diamond, and that lets me know that this is a corner where I could make a very sharp corner if I wanted to with the handles. But in this case, I want to try something a little more curved and organic to bring these shapes together. And I think I'm just going to round off this little sharp edge a little also. So I'm going to just bring that in. And it doesn't have handles, so I just drag those out. Now it's a little bit more curved. So I've got all my pieces here, and I'm going to merge again. So I want that piece, that piece, and then the big piece of main that I was working with already, and merging, coming up to path, and doing union. Whoops, I got the background there. So the undo key, or Control Z on the keyboard, or undo at the top, under edit, is your friend. I undid that so I can make my selection again. So clicking, clicking, clicking. And I only got 4, so this time it should work. So going under path and choosing union, and there we go. Success. There's some ugly pieces here, so I'm going to clean up. Some extra notch that I don't want, so I'm deleting that node. And then if you mouse over, I can see there's still a little edge here. So if I click and then zoom in, something, there we go. There's this stray handle that's creating this really weird curve that it was kind of distorting the shape. So I'm just bringing this handle around to create a little bit of a more organic shape here. So it doesn't look all that great there. Oh, just got a little extra notch. So it doesn't look all that great at this size, but when we zoom out and look at it cleanly, it doesn't look that bad, and it's still true, in my opinion, to the original artwork. And that's only one piece, instead of a really complicated number of pieces to slot together. The last major part I want to show is this portion of the tail over here. On the original drawing, there was actually some fine lines in the tail that gave you a little bit more texture that kind of curved over, but they were so fine that the trace bitmap got rid of them. I'm going to try to put them back in. And you can do that using a lot of the same tools that we were working with the nodes and the handles and the curves. I have the node tool selected, and clicking on this portion, I can see it looks relatively simple, but let's zoom in a little more. There's this little part, and that actually grew out to multiple pieces for the tail. What I want to do is to take this little portion and give me more nodes to work with to add that detail in. To do that, I have the node tool, and clicking on the outline, I see the nodes, and I want to select the 2 nodes where I want to add some more detail in between. So in this area is where I want to put in some additional nodes to draw out this shape. I'm going to click on the 2 nodes, holding down the shift key, so I've got these 2 selected, and coming over here with the plus key, I can insert new nodes into the selected segments. So in between these 2 points, it put another part. What I want to do is kind of add another fan shape to this, so I'm going to need a few more points to work with. So while I've got these selected, I'm just going to give myself a couple more points to work with by clicking. Now there's a lot going on here, but we're going to draw that out. If I scroll a little so I can see where I'm working, I can start dragging these around. Whoops, I had them all selected there. I only want to work with one, so I just clicked off. And now I can move these individual nodes around. So I'm going to kind of draw this shape around, and this outline looks wonky, but don't forget we can make curves now. So there's that first part I want to add, and this is going to become my base. Whoa. For that, and then these other parts will come out and around, and I don't have enough points to continue that shape I want to make. So with this one selected and this one over here for this line segment, I want to add some more nodes in between. So a plus gives me, still got them both selected. Clicking off of them, I can move things around. So that plus gives me some options there. And that's starting to draw it out along here, but I want to curve down the tail a bit too. So I need to add some more nodes in. Let's bring this one in because we want to curve this one around. I'm going to add some nodes in on this piece. And I keep forgetting to unselect. And it's looking a little ugly, but we're going to take care of that. And between these two pieces, I want to add an extra node over here. And true to form, I forget to unselect. So there's the extra shape that I'm pulling out, kind of like taffy or string, if you ever did that string art between the nails. It doesn't look that great, but we're going to start using curves to make this look a little better. I'm going to start up here and start dragging out Y. Whoops. So, you want to make sure that you've got the handles back on again to start dragging out your curves. And now I can start pulling out those curves. And once again, this is a symmetrical one, a smooth one. And I want to be able to curve these individually. So with the point selected, come up and click on making it a corner. And now I can work these curves individually. Oh, I pulled those the wrong way. Oh, and this is got to be made into a corner. And you just play around with it to get a feel for how your lines are working together. So that curve looks pretty good. It's a little tight down here, so we'll take care of that in just a minute, but let's work on this outer piece. So now there's just some cleanup down here at the bottom end of the tail. Not quite happy with how straight things are over here. I'm just going to clean this up a little. So there you go. We just added in that part of the tail which we lost in the original trace bitmap because the details were just too fine. So now I'm going to just quickly finish attaching all the other pieces. You can see I'm just making some little artistic choices here with how I want the mane to look, kind of keeping the focal point of the image with the motion of the mane looking pretty decent. I think this part is going to be a little too thin when we cut, so I'm just going to thicken it up a little. So using the node tool, I'm just going to come up here and just adjust the curve and the placement of things just a little. That just makes it a little easier to work with. I think this piece here can stand to be attached. It's got a lot of detail, so attaching it into one piece isn't going to really detract from the shape, but it's going to make it a lot easier to work with. This one I made way too small, so I need to do some adjustment here. So that last piece in the mane, you can see we really merged together a lot of the pieces to make it into one piece that's going to be easy to work with, but it still retains a lot of the character and shape of the original image. The last little touch I'm going to do is adjust the size of these fine lines here. I know from working with it before, when we tried to cut it really small, this was just a little too tight. So again, using the node tools and the handles, you can adjust these shapes to make them a little better and make for better cuts. I'm also going to adjust this little sharp edge right here because I knew this tore also when we were trying to cut it before. So switching back to the nodes tool, I'm going to dive right in and start working with those shapes. I drew out some of the nodes here, the handles from that corner with the sharp edge, just to make it a little rounder when we work with it. There's still a little notch here, and I'm too much of a perfectionist to let that go. So I'm just going to get rid of that, and Inkscape kept the majority of the curve, but not quite what I wanted. So I can just bring the handle up from the other segment and complete that curve. Now I'm just going to finish widening this up a little. This had a lot of extra nodes down here, so I'm turning off the handles for the moment so I can zoom in and clean things up a little. There. I think that's better, and it's definitely going to cut better. So the last little bit was the horn, and in my original sample I kind of just drew the horn up the side, but I don't like how that turned out. I'm going to try something a little different this time. That one brought out a little bit more of the swirl of the horn. I'm not sure which way I liked best. I'll have to look at them later. So there you go, the completed figure. I merged all these parts down to just a few. So now it's going to be a lot less crazy to cut. Could probably even go a little further over here, and still maintain the integrity of the shape. Let's do that. So there we go. What do you think? Merging shapes together can be a lot of work, but once you're comfortable with the tools, it does go by pretty quickly. And in the long run, if you're going to be using these cuts again, it's probably helpful to make them a little bit simpler to work with when you're gluing things together, as opposed to having tons of little parts, like George is fond of giving me to glue down.
Wow, Ken, a little intimidating?
It's a lot of clicking, but once you get into the flow of it, it really does become a little bit second nature, playing around with all the lines, the handles, the nodes. It's a lot of technology, a lot of terminology, but just play around and I think you'll get used to it.
So, what Ken showed you was kind of new to me also, and I watched it last night. Well, today I went and used your techniques on a bunch of our SVG files. It actually was easy to do, and I'm sure the more that I practice, the better I'll become.
And that means less work for me.
So next week is our final SVG video for coloring books, 401.
And we're going to be covering some advanced topics, working with troublesome images and separating pieces out that don't necessarily scan or make shapes well.
Right. That doesn't mean that you can't keep asking us questions, either in the comments on the video, or you can email us.
If we get enough questions, we'll probably make another tips video just to cover common questions that we feel that we can show through a video to everybody.
So we just want to take a second to say thank you so much. Everyone in the community has been so nice to us.
It's been very welcoming, and we're really glad we've been able to help people out so much.
So please remember to like this video and like us on Facebook and subscribe to our video channel.
And after 401, we're moving on to the #1 most requested topic.
Color images.
So thanks for watching another Crafts by 2 video.
Until next week, or probably sooner.
Yep.
We'll see you later.
Bye.
Bye.